Coming up, LeBron James leads the charge on a huge comeback win for the Lakers, and the Nets beat the champs. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. LeBron James turned back the clock and inspired the Lakers to rally late in Portland yesterday. Locked On Trailblazers trying to hold it together after an embarrassing loss.
Oh, you were looking for the Trailblazers' worst loss of the season? Yeah, I found it. It's Sunday night against the Lakers. I'm Mike Richmond, host of Locked On Blazers. And the Portland Trailblazers lost a basketball game tonight in which they outscored the visiting Los Angeles Lakers by 32 points, a 45-13 drubbing in the second quarter. It was the largest margin in a quarter in the history of the franchise, dating back to 1970, a historic beatdown against one of their rivals to take a 25-point lead into halftime, and they lost. A 25-point lead at halftime, and they lost. Outscored by 34 points in the second half, gave it all away in the third quarter, and could not make a bucket when it mattered in the final 5 minutes. They've been a bad team for a while now. The Blazers have been struggling for, the better part of 2 months, as kind of scuffling as a bad basketball team. This was the worst loss of the season. I'm sure you want to listen to Locked On Blazers for more.
New Orleans also unable to protect a lead. They were up 16 points against Miami before the Heat came back for the win. Locked On Pelicans breaking things down for us after the game.
Same old script for New Orleans in their Sunday afternoon loss to the Miami Heat, but prior to the game, the Pelicans got some very good news. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans. It was more of the same for the New Orleans Pelicans, who are still without Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Build a first-half lead through inspired play, lose it in the third quarter, and be unable to come up with enough offense to close the game out in the fourth. The biggest difference Sunday was rookie Dyson Daniels making a couple of key hustle plays at the end, forcing a jump ball with Jimmy Butler after a horrendous 5-second call by the refs, and then winning that jump ball. But emblematic of the Pelicans' struggling offense, CJ McCollum missed the game-winning three at the end. He was 5 of 16 shooting on the night. The best news for the Pelicans came before the game when head coach Willie Green said that Brandon Ingram has participated in 5-on-5 practice. That's the biggest hurdle he needed to reach before stepping back out on the court. So while the script was the same on Sunday, the Pelicans hope it'll soon be very different.
A huge offensive night from all 5 Toronto starters took care of business for them at home. Locked On Knicks looking at another streak of losses for New York.
The New York Knicks just can't stop winning and losing on streaks. They are now at 4 straight losses after a 125-116 loss to the Toronto Raptors. Alex Wolf here from Locked On Knicks. And things are not looking great for the Knicks right now after losing Mitchell Robinson to injury for now 3 to 5 weeks, I believe, going forward. Things are not looking too great for their defense. They're having a hard time with some fourth quarter burnout. And it doesn't help when you have a guy like Obi Toppin in this game score 14 points in quick succession and yet only get 10.5 minutes. Something's got to change for the Knicks, whether it's a trade or playing guys like Toppin more with Julius Randle. But things are not going to get any easier with Mitchell Robinson out. We'll have more on Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
SGA in hero mode once again for OKC as they sneak out of Denver with a 2-point win. Locked On Thunder in to go over that dramatic finish.
The Oklahoma City Thunder continue to pass test after test, and it doesn't seem like the other shoe is ever going to drop. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder, and the Oklahoma City Thunder got another impressive win, this time on the road in Denver after a heartbreaking loss to the Kings on Friday. Many of us feared how would they respond to that game against the Kings as such a young team. They came out on fire against the Nuggets. It got muddy in the middle, but then SGA hits the game winner. Lou Dort locks up Jamal Murray to end it, and this one is another Thunder win. As we feared trap games, back-to-back road games, and games against tougher competition, everyone is waiting for the Thunder hot streak to cool off, but it might not be coming because these young players are gelling at the perfect time. Hear more about it on Locked On Thunder.
Coming up, the Nets take down the Warriors. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Built Bar. They are the best tasting protein bars on the market, probably because they're made with 100% real chocolate. They also come in dozens of different flavors, so there's something for everyone. I personally like the puffs. Those are made with the protein-infused marshmallow. If you head over to their website, built.com, you can use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. So just make sure you put in that promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order at built.com. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Memphis rallied back from a terrible start against Phoenix, but they could not close things out in the end. Locked On Suns goes over that win. Locked On Grizzlies talks through the comeback, but not quite.
Losing streak to a winning streak, just like that. Brendan Clean coming to you after a 112-110 win by the Phoenix Suns over the Memphis Grizzlies. Chris Paul, in his return to the lineup, playing a ton of minutes, doing a ton of positive stuff. Cam Johnson finally starting after mixing almost 3 months with a torn meniscus and a surgery to repair it. John Morant on the other side, getting what he does into the paint, drawing fouls, scoring, assisting. Back and forth game in the second half. The Suns were able to take a huge lead, but Memphis outscored the Suns by more than 20 points to get things within 2 over the course of the final few possessions. The Suns do just enough to pull it out. Dario Saric with a couple key free throws, a couple of stops by the Suns, some nice timeouts and smart movement there, and that'll do it. For more on these Suns, listen to Locked On Suns wherever you get podcasts.
The rest of Brooklyn's roster stepping up without Kevin Durant in action, and they made a statement last night taking down the defending champs on their home court. Locked On Nets and Locked On Warriors are in with everything that you need to know.
Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets, coming at you following a massive Brooklyn win, 120-116 over the Warriors. The Nets, on the back of Kyrie Irving, on the back of third star Nick Claxton, go into Golden State, face a fully loaded Warriors team that with Brooklyn without Kevin Durant. No problem. They are able to take the game. They come back from a 10-point deficit. They outscore the Warriors 60-44 in the second half. It looked like the game was getting away, but on the back of these two guys, the Nets were able to pull out the win. They're able to start turning things around following a losing skid. It started with Durant out, but now wins on the road against Utah, a win again on the road against Golden State, has this thing headed in the right direction for Brooklyn. We are going to be breaking down the entire thing. One of the better wins of the year over on Locked On Nets.
The Golden State Warriors led most of the way, but despite leading by 13 with less than 7 minutes remaining, they could not hold on and lost at home to the Brooklyn Nets. I'm Cyrus Sauces with your Locked On Warriors, Locked On Now recap of the Warriors falling 120-116 to the Brooklyn Nets to fall below 500 yet again. In fact, they're now 10th in the standings in the Western Conference, and they led by as many as 17 in the second quarter, but thanks to some late game heroics by the Brooklyn Nets, coupled with the Warriors blowing, again, a lot of leads, and a rough season continues. Stephen Curry did contribute as he normally does, 26 points. Jordan Poole added 17, but not enough. The Warriors next host the Memphis Grizzlies on Wednesday.
A poor effort from Dallas again on defense, this time against the Clippers. Locked On Mavs pointing out what went wrong on Sunday afternoon.
The Dallas Mavericks fall to the Los Angeles Clippers, and their focus just wasn't in it. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here. The Dallas Mavericks have a couple of things that really get them hung up, and one of those is that they miss their threes. They go out to the other end of the court. They don't seem to like they're locked in. If their defense isn't locked in, if they don't put a ton of effort on the defensive end, on the rebounding effort, then this team can fall. And the third one is if calls aren't going their way. If the refs start calling things for one team and not calling them for the other team, this Mavs team just gets completely out of the game, and that's exactly what happened in this game. Clippers got a lot of really touchy calls here and there, tic-tac stuff. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they just draw calls a lot. And with the Mavericks, all of a sudden when calls stopped going their way, their offense completely fell off the table. Fourth quarter was a disaster for the Mavericks. Luka Doncic was just completely out of it in so many different ways. A 29-point off game for Luka, but that's what happens when the Dallas Mavericks just stop paying attention on offense really and start getting too focused on what the refs are calling.
That will do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Now make sure you go subscribe to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast here on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.